Economist's top 50 diversity figures in public life. It's a category that recognises the achievements of individuals who have used their position in public life to make an impact in diversity. Others on the lists include Hillary Clinton, Bill Gates, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Caitlyn Jenner and Christiane Amanpour. Correspondent for CNN, Angelina Jolie, Prince Harry. I would say Mei Chen will be very happy to be on that list. So from all of us here at the panel, Mei Chen, congratulations.
Aye.
What should we spend our remaining time on? How about this in Sydney? If you're planning on a trip, let's hope the plane tracking system at Sydney Airport is fixed before you get there. A critical plane tracking system at Australia's busiest airport is failing frequently, leaving air traffic controllers deeply concerned about safety. The ABC reports that in the last month alone, there were 15 failures detected in the Wide Area Multilateration System, or WAM. This means that when the system fails, planes disappear from one screen and are only able to be seen on the older, slower radar system. It's scary stuff. Despite the problems, Air Services Australia continues to use it, which allows them to land more planes each hour. Controllers haven't been trained to deal with the failings, which have to do with the distance between planes. So basically, if it fails when two planes are within a certain distance, all the planes have to be called off at once. This could involve up to 6 different planes, and the controllers haven't been trained in that. Sounds like a disaster waiting to happen, Joe.
You're doing a bit of scaremongery stuff again. It's all to do with that unnatural feeling we shouldn't really be allowed to fly. Flying is by far the safest way of getting around anywhere. I mean, statistically, it's magnificent. And if you just compare the risks at Sydney Airport, you say going back to the old dangerous radar system. Well, the old dangerous radar system has landed me on 1,000 planes perfectly well over the years, and so there's no problem with that whatsoever. And if you look at danger, your danger when you get in a car to go home tonight is 1,000 million times more likely to kill you than and it goes back simply to that vague sense that we shouldn't really be flying.
What do you make of it, Tainui?
Well, I'm concerned if a system's called WHAM. I mean, you go travelling these days and you are very aware there's an awful lot of planes up there. I had a look on the net today, and I think over the States at any one time there's between 11 and 12,000 planes. And you can go to these maps and they'll show you all the flights that are in the air. And it's just kind of astonishing when you just look at all these planes and you go into the town or the hub, and they're everywhere. And for me, I do think that, and that gap you were talking about, I understand, is 2 miles. So while on the screen it might look that it's covered with planes in a particular area of land, those logos, the little icons are much bigger than the planes actually are.
The planes are about 12 miles long.
Exactly.
Yes.
So there is a lot of room up there, but nonetheless, it's just so much more traffic up there these days that you really do hope that the technology and the training kind of
there is a lot
up.
of room up there. You've been on a lot of planes. How often have you seen another plane?
A few, actually, yeah, at a distance, admittedly. And I think to myself, well, it wouldn't take much for just a little degree here and a little degree there.
I just want to throw this last story at you. A Qantas flight in Australia was delayed for more than 2 hours due to a concerning Wi-Fi hotspot name. According to the West Australian newspaper, a passenger turned his Wi-Fi on and saw a Wi-Fi network entitled Mobile Detonation Device. Naturally, that was a bit concerning when you're sitting on a plane on the tarmac at Melbourne Airport. The passenger who noticed the name of the hotspot told the crew, and then they had to work out whether the device with the Wi-Fi hotspot name was on the plane
It's
or not.
exactly the same argument as should you be allowed to make jokes about bombs at airports? Yes, you should, because if you got a bomb, you wouldn't. If your Wi-Fi system was in any way going to explode, you wouldn't call it explosive Wi-Fi system, would you?
All right, very good. Hey, Tainui Stevens, lovely to have you, and thanks very much for coming.
Kia ora, Jesse. Kia ora, Joe.
Joe Bennett, I'll see you at Writers' Week in Auckland in a couple of weeks. Thanks for coming on with us as well. You're getting a lot of support on text, by the way. Go, the Marxists, go. Thanks for tuning in to the panel. Jim Mora is back tomorrow, and Checkpoint with John Campbell coming up shortly.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell, and on behalf of the Checkpoint team, thank you for joining us. Tonight, is the Overseas Investment Office a very low bar indeed? What does it take to get a no from them? The car crash in Northland, the family speaks about their grief and how they feel for the American driver, but how 3 lives were lost, not 2. The largest ever genetic study of breast cancer, giving a near complete picture of what causes the disease, while Australia funds another immunotherapy drug not funded in New Zealand. And sometimes, very occasionally, fairy tales come true. We're in Leicester, where the 5,000 to 1 outsider came in. It's a magic interview. All that and much more in the next 90 minutes. But first, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. The Overseas Investment Office is apologising to the government for failing to conduct a robust inquiry when it approved the sale of Onatai Station in Taranaki to a foreign company. The government has ordered an independent inquiry into the office and the way it carries out good character tests on foreign buyers. The Labour Party revealed last week the Argentinian buyers were convicted for illegally dumping chemicals from their Argentinian tannery. The Land Information Minister, Louise Upston, says the Overseas Investment Office clearly dropped the ball. Land Information New Zealand's Chief Executive, Peter Mercy, says his office failed to carry out a robust investigation into the applicants. He says it also failed to alert the Minister to information it had about the pollution incident. The Prime Minister says he's being straight with the public about his involvement with the foreign trust sector. John Campbell says he did what anyone would expect him to do by referring a query to a minister. During question time in Parliament, the Labour leader, Andrew Little, asked Mr Campbell if his personal lawyer misrepresented him when lobbying the government not to review foreign trust rules.
When the Prime Minister's lawyer went to a junior minister and said, "The Prime Minister says you will protect my business," does he think that this just might have influenced that minister's decision-making in this case?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, well, the member's making it up. That is not what I said. I did what anyone would expect me to do. If I'm approached by someone, whether I know them or whether I don't, I refer them to another minister.
John Campbell says he told the Minister, Todd McClay, he had been approached by his lawyer as part of a foreign trust industry group. The family of a pregnant woman killed in a Northland crash on Saturday says the driver who caused the accident should also be charged with the death of her unborn child. Kylie Rakic and another passenger, Virginia Keogh, were killed when their car collided head-on with a car driven by an American tourist. Kylie Rakic's partner and her 5-year-old daughter were injured. The American man has been charged with careless driving, causing death and injury. But Kylie's sister, Leish King, says her sister was 8 months pregnant and the charges should reflect that. The Breast Cancer Foundation says lives will be saved as a result of new research unveiled today. An international study into breast cancer has revealed 5 new genes associated with the disease and 13 new mutations that influence tumour development. The Foundation's Chief Executive, Evangelia Henderson, says the discovery of the BRCA1 and 2 genes 21 years ago was a similar landmark development. She says between 5 and 10% of breast cancers are BRCA-related.
For those people, that's, means that their lives have been saved. So in the future, when more genes have been identified, more women's lives will be saved because those people can be identified that have a much higher risk of developing those breast cancers.
Evangelia Henderson of the New Zealand Breast Cancer Foundation. Australia says refugee advocates are encouraging asylum seekers to harm themselves after a second person set themselves on fire at a detention camp on Nauru. An Iranian man died after setting fire to himself a week ago, and a Somali woman is in a critical condition after self-immolating last night. 21-year-old Hodan Yassin was flown to Brisbane this morning for treatment. Australia's Immigration Minister, Peter Dutton, says advocates are among those encouraging asylum seekers to pressure the government to bring them to Australia. He says this behaviour has now turned to extreme acts of violence.
Advocates who proclaim to represent and support the interests of refugees and asylum seekers must frankly hear a very clear message, and I'll repeat it again today. Their activities and these behaviours must end.
Australia's Immigration Minister, Peter Dutton. The Employment Relations Authority has ordered AFCO to reinstate a worker it says was unfairly treated by the company. AFCO has also been told to pay the man, Dennis Harris, for being unjustifiably dismissed from its Moirewa site. The company must reimburse 3 months' pay and pay him $7,500 for humiliation and loss of dignity. AFCO said Mr Harris had written the word scab 6 times inside the locker of another worker and damaged the locker. But the authority said AFCO's investigation into him was procedurally unfair with significant defects. In sport, the suspended Warriors and Kiwis winger Manu Vatuvei has been put on medical leave by the National Rugby League club. And the Warriors managing director Jim Doyle says the club is continuing to focus on the welfare of the other 5 players who were disciplined in the wake of the loss to Melbourne last week. 6 players, including Vatuvei, were reportedly involved in a night out where they mixed prescription drugs with energy drinks and then failed to turn up for a team meeting the next day. All 6 were suspended from the Warriors' next game against St George Illawarra, and Vatuvei, Ben Matulino and Bodine Thompson were barred from being picked for Friday night's test against the Kangaroos in Newcastle. Meanwhile, the Parramatta Eels have been stripped of 12 competition points and fined $1 million for rorting the NRL salary cap. The NRL's chief executive, Todd Greenberg, says the club has been using a variety of mechanisms to get around the cap since 2013.
Paying players undisclosed remuneration from the club's own resources, sourcing third-party agreements for players in breach of the salary cap rules, arranging with club suppliers to inflate or issue fictitious invoices to raise money that was to be made available to the players.
NRL CEO Todd Greenberg. And it's been a day of double celebration for the English city of Leicester. Leicester City have won the English Premier League for the first time, while Leicester's Mark Selby has won the World Snooker title for a second time. And that's the news.
Failing to deliver.
Yes, they're required to deliver deliverable mail, but she has very strong principles about what she's doing for New Zealand Post.
Dropping the ball.
Any time that a player is using a combination of drinks which we know to be mind-altering, then that's clearly a concern.
Refusing to budge.
The government has certainly not moved to lessen the demand on houses, in Auckland in particular.
Questions and answers. Morning reports with Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, the Australian ecologist who's targeting feral cats by using their grooming instincts against them. And after 10, Hanya Yanagihara on her acclaimed novel, A Little Life, a no-holds-barred tale of the friendship between 4 young men in New York City. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty, mostly fine with isolated showers tomorrow. Waikato, Waitomo, Taumarunui, Taupo and Taranaki, cloudy periods and a few showers. Whanganui, Manawatu, Taihape, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine with variable high cloud. Kapiti, Wairarapa and Wellington, occasional rain, mainly in the west with some heavy falls about the ranges, easing tomorrow and clearing from Wairarapa. Nelson and Marlborough, cloudy periods and scattered showers, mostly about the Sounds and Ranges. Canterbury, fine, high cloud increasing tomorrow. Otago and Southland, fine, however rain developing in Southland and Clutha tomorrow afternoon, spreading elsewhere during the evening. Bulla Westland and Fiordland, rain spreading everywhere tomorrow morning with heavy falls south of Otira, and the Chatham Islands mainly fine. It's coming up to 5:09.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Coming up on Checkpoint, the Overseas Investment Office, some special Taranaki land, 2 Argentinian brothers, the Panama Papers and an inquiry. We talk to the Minister. How low does the OIO set the bar? That's coming up, but we do begin tonight with the family of a pregnant woman killed in that Northland crash on Saturday. Kylie Rakic was killed when the car driven by her partner Cameron Dwight was involved in a head-on crash with a car driven by an American tourist. He was travelling with his wife. Cameron and Kylie's 5-year-old daughter Rangi Mari were airlifted to Whangarei Hospital. Another passenger, another Northland woman, Virginia Keogh, died at the scene. The American tourist faces 2 charges of careless use of a motor vehicle causing death. Kylie's sister says the family really want a mandatory stand-down period to be considered for foreign drivers when they first arrive in New Zealand. And Leash King says it's important for the family to acknowledge that 3 people died in the crash as her sister was 8 months pregnant with a baby girl the couple had already named Harper.
They didn't acknowledge Harper You know, she was still a person. She was still a baby. You know, she wasn't far from coming into the world. And they said nothing about her, which I felt was really, I felt that was unjustified. That bit there where he only got charged for the 2 and not the 3 of them. That was really hard for the whole family, not just myself.
Leash, what happened exactly? Do you know what happened?
They were heading north and an American tourist driver was heading south and he was on the lane. When they came around the corner, my brother-in-law says he was doing 100. If they were going that fast, they had no way that they were going to miss each other. He did try and go onto his lane and use his lane, and then so the American tourist also tried to correct himself and get back onto his own lane, and that's when they connected.
So on the face of it, the American tourist appears to have just forgotten he was in New Zealand and he was driving on the wrong side of the road.
That's my understanding of it, yeah.
And both cars tried to correct to the other side of the road.
Yeah. My brother-in-law tried to swerve to miss him and use his side of the lane, and he tried to correct himself and go back onto the side he was meant to be on. And doing that, he hit the passenger side of the car where my sister was sitting and the other passenger that passed away, Virginia.
And so, I mean, there's, I guess, what can anything come from this that will be worthwhile in the long term? Is there anything that we can take from this other than the terrible tragedy of the loss of 3 lives?
Yeah, we need tighter restriction on tourist driving around New Zealand. You know, especially arriving the day before he crashed. That's too soon. You know, it's too soon for them to be driving on our roads. I mean, they have no, they're too used to driving on their side of the road, and they forget when they get here. Tourists doing U-turns. There needs to be tighter restrictions on that. There just has to be.
Are you guys in the north kind of familiar with this? Because, of course, a lot of people arrive from Auckland and just head to the winterless north, don't they? So is this discussed in the north? Do you see driving like this?
Mostly it happens in the north, like, when they turn in front of truck drivers. I've actually seen one myself. I was coming home, going back to work, and I saw one do a U-turn right in front of me. That was really, really close. So, yeah, they just need to be aware of other people, and the things that they're doing when they're on the road.
Leash, did you go to the court appearance yesterday?
No, I didn't.
Do you know anyone who went?
I don't know anyone who went. I was actually waiting for someone to give us a call back to let us know what happened at the court case.
Yeah.
I read about it in the paper.
Because obviously the American driver is just devastated. I'm completely devastated.
He would be, and I feel for them both, because that was tragic. It would have been tragic for them too.
Leash, tell us about Kylie. Tell us about her.
She was my baby sister. She was so happy, bubbly. Her and her friends, there were 5 of them, Jordan, Jess, Renee, Carp, and her. They used to do silly things all the time, They were real happy, outgoing people. She was the most gorgeous person that anyone could ever meet, not one bad bone in her body, and just the silly little things that she did when she was here. It's kind of backed us up all the way through her tangi. It's just been so overwhelming. But she was an awesome person. She's left massive dents in people's hearts here.
And she's got a 5-year-old girl, right? Does she like her mum?
She also has a 5-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
She is so much like her mum. She's here now, running around, laughing, playing with her friends and her cousins. She does know what's happening. She does understand.
That was Kylie Rakic, her sister Leash King, and Kylie was killed. Kylie was 8 months pregnant with Harper. Another Northern woman, Virginia, was also killed. We received a text not long after recording that interview, which we only did about 4 o'clock, from Leash saying, we really want to stress this mandatory stand-down period. And we'd love your feedback on this, because obviously so many tourists are coming to New Zealand and they are hugely important to our economy, and by and large they drive without incident, but there does seem to be, especially in the last year or so, a large number of reports, particularly once they get away from lots of other traffic and lots of other cars, of people who forget where they are and end up on the wrong side of the road. How do we manage this? We'd love to hear from you. Text 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. The time on Checkpoint is 5:16. The Overseas Investment Office to be the subject of an independent review following the granting of approval for the sale of Onyetai Station in Taranaki to two brothers who purchased it through a Panamanian trust set up by Mossack Fonseca. The Argentinian brothers were later found to have been criminally responsible for environmental pollution and discharging toxic chemicals into a river, something they hadn't declared and something the OIO hadn't picked up on when granting the approval. Land Information Minister Louise Upston said she was not happy and had asked for the review. Peter Mercy, the Chief Executive of Land Information, has apologised to the Minister and said it won't happen again. He also said that now, when assessing applicants, the OIO searches their history using keywords such as fraud and conviction. That's astounded Labour's finance spokesperson Grant Robertson.
It's laughable that they haven't had somebody responsible for doing a Google search on terms like fraud. Surely that's a core part of their job. What it does is it brings into question every single application that the OIO has processed when it comes to sensitive land.
Grant Robertson. So, Land Information Minister Louise Upston has confirmed there will be a review of the OIO as a result of the case. I asked her if approval for the purchase of the land should have been given.
Look, I'm not going to comment or speculate on what would have happened if different information had been available at the time the approval was given.
Why wasn't it available at the time the approval was given? Because if the approval process was even remotely robust, it would have been available, wouldn't it?
Well, what it appears from the information available to me from the Chief Executive is that this is a one-off incident.
How do you know that? I mean, that's an extraordinary thing to assert. How do you possibly know this is a one-off incident, given that this has only been stumbled upon accidentally?
Well, what it appears at this stage is it is one person. This is a process that people are involved with. So while it is absolutely unacceptable, that information that someone was aware of did not put that in the application when the decision makers were considering it, it is unacceptable. So that's why the Chief Executive is going to undertake this independent review to ensure that the processes that the Overseas Investment Office use are applied consistently, because, you know, this issue has arisen and it's a serious issue.
Okay. The Chief Executive is going to undertake an independent review. In what way is it independent?
Well, my understanding is that he is seeking a QC who will undertake that review.
Okay. Forgive me, but can I just clarify, can we agree that had it not been for the Panama Papers, this application would have slipped through and would never have been reconsidered in any circumstance?
That is a possibility.
It's highly likely, isn't it? It's more than a possibility.
But what happens, so of the, several hundred applications that are considered by the Overseas Investment Office, if there is an occasion, which happens rarely, this is one of those occasions where there is a serious allegation raised about an applicant, the Overseas Investment Office investigate it. That is exactly what is happening.
No, but isn't this... So doesn't this speak to the universal and the particular, Minister? In other words, doesn't this speak to precisely what Jane Kelsey says, and I quote, the Overseas Investment Office has a culture of approval. It's just easy to get through these guys, isn't it?
No, it is definitely not. There are 23 criteria that the Overseas Office have to consider, the legislation, it is clear. It is a privilege to own New Zealand land and significant assets. There is a high hurdle to pass. In this instance, there was information that was found and not brought to the attention of ministers. That is the issue with this particular application. And as you will see, the other change that the office put in place was to put information in the application for decision makers to consider. That meant if there was information that was found, that could be taken into consideration. The other part that I think is important just to put on record is that every applicant is required to sign a statutory declaration which says that they are of good character, that they have disclosed any convictions, that they have, provided full information.
So did these applicants sign this? They did sign it?
They did sign the statutory declaration.
So, in fact, they're in breach of that statutory declaration, aren't they? They misled you.
So what happens now, as I said, as a result of the information and the serious allegation being made, the OIO will now fully investigate that.
Except were it not for the Panama Papers. Are you using this as evidence in defence of the OIO? I would say that in fact it's really problematic because they signed the statutory declaration, they willfully misled you and the OIO, and we would not know this were it not for the Panama Papers. In other words, they would have gotten away with it, wouldn't they?
Well, I think the important thing is there's an investigation underway, and it wouldn't be prudent for me to prejudge the outcome of that investigation. You're drawing some threads that may or may not be able to be drawn together, but I will wait on the investigation by the OIO and wait to see what happens with that information.
Do you have full confidence in the OIO?
I have some concerns about how they've handled this individual application, which is why I have asked the Chief Executive. I am seeking assurance about the OIO review processes around good character.
Do you think it's only this individual application?
At this stage, but I will wait until the independent review is completed before I comment on that.
Louise Upston, who is the Land Information Minister. Just about 23 minutes past 5, coming up on Checkpoint, relief in Masterton after a brother and sister missing since Sunday night are found. We're going to go there in a moment. A fairy tale comes true for Leicester as they take out the English Premier League at odds of 5,000 to 1. That was at the beginning of the season. Amazing story. And why melanoma patients here believe Australia really is the lucky country as it signs off on yet another immunotherapy drug to treat the disease, and a breakthrough for an international team of scientists who've just completed the largest ever genetic study of breast cancer. All of that and more on the OIO and what's going on there coming up on Checkpoint. We would love to hear from you about any of the subjects we're covering. Text 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Don't forget, we're live streaming on the RNZ website and on Freeview Channel 50. And we have a Checkpoint Twitter and Facebook page. Media covered off. There's relief in Masterton tonight after a brother and sister missing since Sunday were found safe and sound. Officers mounted a search when the school children disappeared on their push bikes. The pair were found near the Te Ori Road Bridge in Masterton shortly before 2 o'clock this afternoon. Our reporter Michael Kropp joins us from outside the Masterton police station via live view. Hi Michael, you've just spoken with the children's caregiver, right?
Yes, I just met with Dean Rennie. I was actually sitting there waiting to talk to the sergeant responsible when the two kids and their caregivers came out of an interview room. So I quickly spoke to him, and Dean had, you could tell that they were so relieved to have these kids back. They're two of 5 kids from that family that they look after. They're their aunt and uncle, and so they've taken these kids on for about 6 or 7 years, he was saying. But he wasn't keen to answer all of the questions that I had to ask, but I did get the sense that home life wasn't easy for Harlem and Lyric, the 2 kids that ran away. He wouldn't go further on that, but I have been told that perhaps some of the kids share beds. So a few questions there about family life and why those kids ran away, really.
Okay, where were they found?
they were found under the Te Ori Ori Bridge. I went out there and had a wee look around. There were quite a few wasps, so they're brave kids. I'll definitely give them that. But there was this great, so I went and had a wee scout around under the bridge, and it was this, lovely lush grass, and it was warm and it was dry. I spoke to the mechanics at this big yard next door, and they said they hadn't seen anything other than the police and a dog handler later that afternoon at about 1:30, 2 o'clock when the kids were found.
Okay, Michael, I understand that you've heard from Harlem's teachers something about him and the fact that he was safe?
Yeah, so the school found out that the kids were missing at about 7:30 yesterday morning, and his teacher said that she spent the whole day worrying, just casually asking the children, because it was the first day back of term, so there were a few kids still on holiday. So she was just saying, what does anyone know where Harlem is? Is he still on holiday? Stuff like that, just peppering those questions throughout the day, because they weren't sure whether to be worried or not at that point. But the teacher, Mrs. Nicola Veal, she said that yesterday evening she went for a bike ride around the area, just to have a look around, see if she could see anything, see if she could spot him. His principal, Russell Thompson, also had only good things to say about Harlem. I don't really know about Lyric, and because she's at the primary school down the road, but this was at Masterton Intermediate. The principal there, Russell Thompson, was saying that at the end of last year, Harlem was one of the very top Year 7 students that they had, and he'd come a long way in that year. So very, very good student by the sounds of things, and they were utterly relieved to have this good news about their, finding them safe earlier today.
Michael Crop, I'm sure everyone feels equally relieved. Lovely news that those two children, Harlem and Lyric, who looked to have taken off on their bikes on Sunday night, were found safe and well, not far from home at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Well, let's change the subject entirely. One of professional sport's best kept secrets really is that David doesn't beat Goliath very often at all. When was the last time an outsider won Wimbledon or the Rugby World Cup or the World Series or the Football World Cup or anything of real global significance? Even Eddie the Eagle, the personification of the sporting outsider, when he somehow made it to the Winter Olympics, of course, came last in his events. But this morning it happened. A team ranked 5,000 to 1 won. They're worse odds, by the way, than William Hill once posted on Elvis being found alive after he died. Yes, Leicester City won English soccer's Premier League. Not Man U or Man City, not Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal or Tottenham, but Leicester City. Founded in 1884, this is the first time they've won that competition. And among the people we saw out celebrating was the MP for Leicester East, tweeting up a storm. It was quite late by the time we got Keith Vaz's home number, but on the night Leicester City won the league, no one had gone to bed in Leicester.
Hello.
Hello, Keith. It's John Campbell from Radio New Zealand in New Zealand. How are you?
Hello, John. Ecstatic with joy.
What's the time? What time am I talking to you at?
It's 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning.
I've never interviewed an MP at 1 o'clock in the morning before. It's very exciting.
There's never been a day like this, John.
How long have you been the MP for Leicester East for?
29 years.
And what does it mean in that community?
Oh, I went up today from London because Parliament is sitting tomorrow, so I'm down in London. And I thought I'd just be outside the King Power Stadium. There were 2 people there when I arrived. When I left, there were 2,000. And people are just ecstatic with joy. It is like the greatest day in the history of the city. Nobody can quite believe it. If you didn't believe in miracles before, then please believe in them now, because with sheer hard work and dedication and brilliance, Leicester City have become the most famous football club in the world.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And with all due respect to Leicester City, from the position of kind of rank outsiders, really.
Well, 5,000 to 1, and it shows that front runners don't always win, and that rank outsiders do win. And we're all now looking forward to Gary Lineker presenting Match of the Day in his underpants, as he said he would. So this is something that, we're all waiting for.
Well, he's a fine figure of a man. I mean, that won't be an unpleasant thing, will it?
Well, we don't know. We've not seen it before, so we'll just have to wait and see.
That's true enough. Tell me about what it means to a city, because if you look at the way football works, it is the Manchesters, it is the Liverpools, it is the Londons where, you know, victory has been experienced over and over and over again. What is it like when it turns up there?
Well, it is very good, because actually what it shows is that the Premier League cannot be bought. We have new owners who came a few years ago who helped us stay in the Championship. We were nearly relegated last year, and they have just given us a lot of support. There's been a lot of praying going on. I think we've had the owners with their support from Buddhist monks. I've been taking my rosary. Others have been bringing in other religions. So there's been a lot of praying going on. I think that's actually helped a lot. But more than anything else, it's this belief that you can be an outsider and that you can win, and you can do so without having to spend billions and billions of pounds.
Yes, that's a great story, isn't it? And sport needs those stories. Yeah, and also the world needs religious pluralism. That's a good thing, isn't it? All you people of different religions praying together.
We are the most multicultural city in the world, I think, with Thai owners, with Italian managers, with a chief executive who's an Irish woman, and with players from all over the world, including those born in Leicester. So it's quite an achievement.
Perish the thought. So look, I'm keeping you up, and I really appreciate your time. And aptly enough, you're a very good sport. But does it lift a city in a way that is really meaningful? Will people have a spring in their step in the morning?
They will have a huge spring in their step in the morning. I certainly will be when I go into Parliament tomorrow, and I'm trying very hard to put a big scarf around Big Ben, but I'm not sure that Mr. Speaker will allow me to do so.
Well, it's lovely to talk to you, and congratulations as the MP for Leicester East. It's a great day, and we're delighted to find you up and available at this hour of the morning.
Thank you very much.
Keith Baz, who was the MP for Leicester East, a tremendously posh voice, but I should say he's a Labour MP. A Labour MP for 30 years, and a tremendously good sport. We called him at home, I think it was 1 a.m. We said it was 1 a.m. Utterly delighted to be answering the phone in those circumstances. Lovely. That's what sport's about. Like when Japan beat South Africa at the Rugby World Cup. They are magic moments to cherish. Coming up, John Key defends his relationship with his ministers. Let's bring a sting in. Much better defending a relationship with your ministers and his personal lawyer with a sting underneath. After allegations he pressured the Revenue Minister to drop a review of the foreign trust sector, we'll speak to New Zealand's principal youth court judge, Andrew Beecroft, who's been appointed as the new Children's Commissioner. It's a big appointment, and how Queenstown's accommodation crisis is impacting on Cromwell. Nona is sitting beside us with business news, but first, Katrina with the headlines.
The Overseas Investment Office is apologising to the government for failing to conduct a robust inquiry when it approved the sale of Onatai Station in Taranaki to a foreign company. The government has ordered an independent inquiry into the office following revelations the farm's Argentinian buyers were convicted for illegally dumping chemicals from their Argentinary tannery. The Prime Minister says he's being straight with the public about his involvement with the foreign trust sector and did what anyone would expect him to do by referring a query to the Minister. John Key's been forced to defend himself and his personal lawyer, Ken Whitney, in Parliament this afternoon following allegations he pressured the Revenue Minister to drop a review of the trust sector. The family of a pregnant woman killed in a Northland crash on Saturday says the driver who caused the accident should also be charged with the death of her unborn child. Kylie Rakic and another passenger were killed when their car collided head-on with a car driven by an American tourist. The American man has been charged with careless driving causing death and injury. But Kylie's sister, Leash King, says she was 8 months pregnant and the charges should reflect that. The Employment Relations Authority has ordered AFCO to reinstate a worker it says was unfairly treated by the company. AFCO has also been told to pay the man, Dennis Harris, several $1,000s for being unjustifiably dismissed from its Morewa site. AFCO said Mr Harris had written the word scab 6 times inside the locker of another worker and damaged the locker, but the authority said AFCO's investigation into him was procedurally unfair. Australia says refugee advocates are encouraging asylum seekers held in its offshore detention centres to harm themselves. A second person had set themselves on fire at a detention camp on Nauru. Australia's Immigration Minister says advocates are encouraging asylum seekers to pressure the government to bring them to Australia. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6 with more news, sport and weather.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with Nona Peltier. Nona, another bank profit unveiled today, ANZ?
That's right, we did. We had another profit. It wasn't as good as I guess it was pretty good. It's the largest bank in New Zealand, but it was it dipped from the year earlier. So the first 6 months of the year, the ANZ New Zealand's net profit fell 13%, and but still $763 million profit. It's
wow.
It's still pretty good profit.
That's a 6-month figure.
Yeah, it is.
And what did Westpac do yesterday? 400 and something.
Yeah, 400 and about a half. It's still pretty good profits.
Right. Any explanation for the dip?
Yeah, it was just sort of one-off. There was one-time item that they had, and then there was it was in one segment. Overall, though, the bank's underlying performance was quite strong. In fact, they're quite pleased with it. They saw retail customer numbers increase. Their bad debts were, pretty modest for a bank that size, about $50 million, which is really not too bad for a bank as big as the ANZ. And I spoke with the chief executive, David Hisco, and he said their second half is going gangbusters, so he's pretty happy.
Wow, as it would be.
And he said the low interest rate environment is really... okay, it's a bit of a challenge for the bank, but overall it's a good thing for consumers. And so they're saving more and some of them are spending more. So it's, yeah.
Right, speaking of interest rates, and both ANZ and Westpac are Australian owned, right? And in Australia, the Reserve Bank has cut rates just this afternoon, has it?
That's right. Now, so, okay, it was a surprise, but the thing is, it would have been a surprise no matter which way it went.
Yep.
Because the market only priced in 50-50. We're certain which way the Reserve Bank would go in Australia, but no, they dropped their key interest rate there by 1/4 of a percentage point, so 0.25 to 1.75%. Which is really, amazing.
What is it here? 2.25?
Yes, that's right.
So 0.5% higher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
wow,
that caused we would have seen a reaction regardless. But what happened then was the Australian dollar fell about 1 cent against the US dollar, and the New Zealand, and also fell against the New Zealand dollar by about the same.
Yeah.
And at first, the New Zealand dollar was really steady because the focus was really on what was going on with the Australian cross. However, now the New Zealand dollar has edged back because the world sees the currencies as sort of one and the same. So the New Zealand dollar's come back a little bit as a result of that. And I guess the only other big news we had today was the Tegel Foods.
Float.
Yeah, the float. And hey, they debuted at a 9% premium to their issue price. So they issued the price at $1.55 and opened this morning at $1.69. Came down a little bit from there, but still very good open, strong open for Tegel.
When I was a kid and I worked in a share-broking firm, we called that a stag, right? So that is, you get the list, you sell on opening day, you make a very quick profit. That's 9% for having it for about a few weeks. It's money for jam.
Yeah, really, it's not very much. And anyway, so Tegel's quite happy. They're now moving forward with their plans to develop their export markets because they say that New Zealand chicken is popular everywhere. It's not just here.
You told us what the dollar was. What did the markets do?
Yeah, okay. So, the markets, our top 50 index rose about 0.75%. That's 51 points to 6,843. Currently, our Kiwi dollar's trading at 92.3 cents Australian and 69.8 US.
That is up against the Aussie. Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier, our Auckland business reporter. Good to talk to you as always. John Key has been forced to defend his relationship with his ministers and his personal lawyer, Ken Whitney, in Parliament after allegations he pressured the Revenue Minister to drop a review of the foreign trust sector. In a 2014 email, Mr Whitney said he was worried about what Inland Revenue might be planning, and he lobbied the Prime Minister not to change the foreign trust rules. A year later, IRD decided no review would be held, though John Key maintains he personally had no involvement in that decision. Here's our political reporter, Demelza Leslie.
During question time today, the Labour leader Andrew Little asked the Prime Minister to clarify his involvement in the IRD's decision.
When the Prime Minister's lawyer went to a junior minister and said, "The Prime Minister says you will protect my business," Does he think that this just might have influenced that minister's decision-making in this case?
The Right Honourable
Mr. Speaker,
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, well, the member's making it up. That is not what I said. I did what anyone would expect me to do. If I'm approached by someone, whether I know them or whether I don't, I refer them to another minister.
Mr Little then asked Mr Key if he pressured the then Revenue Minister Todd McClay when he told him about his personal lawyer wanting to lobby him on his business.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, see, this is the problem. The member loses credibility when he makes stuff up. This is it's a well-known and established fact. My personal lawyer is involved in trust businesses, and that's businesses established under the rules of the Labor government.
Mr Little continued to question what the Prime Minister said.
Why won't he be straight with New Zealanders about what he said to his lawyer, what he said to his minister, and what he said to anyone else in his efforts to protect the tax-dodging industry, rather than constantly changing his story and blaming others?
John Key said he had been completely straight.
And the member doesn't like it because it doesn't suit his wild conspiracy theories. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, I am an available Prime Minister. I do walk around. People do talk to me.
On Monday, John Key told RNZ News that he had told Todd McClay that he had been approached by his lawyer, who was part of a foreign trust industry group. But today, the former Revenue Minister says it was not clear to him when he met with 8 trust lawyers to discuss foreign trust rules that one of them was the Prime Minister's lawyer.
The Prime Minister raised with me that a lawyer had a conversation with him. He told him to write to the Minister, received that email, passed it on, it was dealt with in the same way.
Todd McClay says none of the 8 trust lawyers he met with told him who they represented. John Key told reporters he was very clear with Mr McClay that it was his lawyer that approached him.
Well, it's 2 years ago. It's an oral conversation that lasted a few seconds, but I definitely told him.
Ken Whitney used the name Ken Whitney, or just that it was
my lawyer?
The Prime Minister says his lawyer used sloppy language when lobbying the government not to review foreign trust rules. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Demelza Leslie.
Coming up on Checkpoint, we are going to look at new immunotherapy drug funding in Australia and amazing research into breast cancer. That's coming up. We're just waiting for Judge Beecroft, Andrew Beecroft, who is the new Children's Commissioner, to join us. Lots and lots of feedback on 2 issues. One, foreign drives. Any accident involving drivers from overseas is a tragedy for all involved, says Anthony, but those calling for restrictions on overseas drivers must understand such restrictions are reciprocal and will be applied to Kiwis travelling overseas. Is this what people want? Someone else's USA camper van rentals mandate no driving until you have had 1 night's sleep after the flight arrives. Easter down south, says Jack, 4 near misses, 3 wrong side of a road on a corner, 1 U-turn over brow of a hill on a state highway. We do get lots of descriptions of that kind of driving, particularly once people have been away from the cities for a while, out in the Mackenzie country, Lewis Pass, on the road to Queenstown. Understand the sentiment for mandatory stand down, but sadly I don't think it will stop these accidents. I moved back from Europe last October and was much safer in those early weeks when I was vigilant about the dangers. 3 months later, in January, I pulled out of a driveway on a rural road into the wrong side of the road. Autopilot. Lucky for everyone, no harm done, but I also had looked the wrong way and could have killed someone. Sadly, it can happen anytime. Clear arrow markings on roads help, but I guess too expensive. That's a very good email, thank you. And yeah, clear arrow markings, particularly when tourists are exiting spots that tourists tend to visit in great numbers, and that was the case, we think, in the north. New Zealand's principal youth court judge, Andrew Beecroft, has been appointed as the new Children's Commissioner. Judge Beecroft will take over the role from paediatrician Dr Russell Wills in July. He will resign from his position as principal youth court judge and will be on secondment from his duties as a district court judge. Judge Beecroft joins us live on Checkpoint now. Welcome to the program, Judge Beecroft, and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a great honour, it's a privilege, and it's a real challenge that I hope I'm up for.
Well, yes, we're meant to be dispassionate on RNZ, but having observed you in the youth court and your role there, I think it's fair to say you passionately give a damn, don't you, about the children who have appeared before you?
Well, I hope so, yeah. I think that there's not much point doing the role if you don't think you can make a difference, and I've taken up this role with that attitude in mind.
And what percentage of the children who appear in the youth court have come from homes where they desperately needed more support?
75% of those appearing have an existing or past child, youth and family history. Bear in mind, in the youth court, we had 1,982 kids last year. They are the toughest, the most disadvantaged, the most disordered children in New Zealand, and the common theme through all of it, I guess I've had a privileged seat almost in the front row of the grandstand, is what didn't happen, say 0 to 2, 0 to 7.
And what didn't happen?
Stable, loving families, good input, involvement from school, from community, from good friends, and probably living in relative poverty for New Zealand. And many of these kids, most of the tough ones, come from pockets of what you might call a third-generation permanent underclass. That's our challenge as a country.
It is. And what can the Children's Commissioner do about that?
Well, I think it's an independent role. So whereas in the past I've been restricted in what I can say in terms of individual cases and in terms of offending against the law, this is an opportunity to talk about themes and developments. I hope one thing I can do, and I think all Children's Commissioners have tried to do this, is to provoke and prompt debate. In New Zealand, you know, I'm a proud New Zealander, like I know you are, John. Some of our top performing young people do outstandingly well. But, you know, in most areas of socioeconomic measurement, our children are in the bottom half, at the bottom end. And that's just not good enough. And the rates of child abuse in New Zealand, they ought to appall us. We have to talk about this as a country. It's unlikely that any statutory changes, and I'm keen to see those happen in the way that the services are delivered, will bring us to nirvana. It'll improve the situation, I hope, and we desperately need better intervention, more targeted intervention. But I think the real question is, as a community as a whole, how have we got to a point where these rates of abuse and neglect are so relatively high? How do we tolerate it? Why do we tolerate it? How can we address it? That's a debate for the whole community.
It is. It's such an important debate, and I wonder if we have created a kind of society where lots of us never see that stuff, right? Because you asked the question, how has it happened? Do you think people know it's happened?
I often think in terms of our youth court work that many New Zealanders assume that these are just naughty teenagers.
That's right, tagging walls or smoking a bit of dope or stealing the odd car or something, right?
Yeah, but doing dumb and stupid and irresponsible things. In fact, those offenders are dealt very well by the police without coming to court. We're left within court for about 20% of young offenders, and I think the average New Zealander would be shocked at the level of disorder and abuse and neglect in their lives. Yes, these young people cause victims and abuse themselves, but they have invariably been victimised and abused personally. And they don't come to us out of the blue. They come known to most government agencies. They come with deep-seated issues. And we get them at age 15, 14. I think we do a pretty good job in New Zealand. Our system's misunderstood. I think we can hold our heads up high. But we could do so much better at the earlier ages. That's often said, half the cost, twice the effectiveness.
Andrew Beecroft, who is the new Children's Commissioner, thank you for joining us on Checkpoint, and we'd love your feedback on what Andrew Beecroft was saying. 11.5 to 6. It's been described as a hugely significant breakthrough. An international team of scientists has completed the largest ever genetic study of breast cancer, which they say gives them a near complete picture of what causes the disease. The scientists sequenced the whole genome of more than 500 cases of breast cancer. It means treatment could be transformed from a one-size-fits-all approach to drugs that target specific mutations. The BBC's health reporter James Gallagher reports.
To understand the causes of cancer, scientists have to know what goes wrong in our DNA, our blueprint of life that transforms healthy tissue into cancerous tissue. Scientists led by the Sanger Institute in Cambridge analysed all 3 billion letters of the genetic code in more than 500 patients with breast cancer in the largest ever study of its kind. The researchers say there are 93 sets of instructions, or genes, that if mutated can cause tumours. Professor Sir Mike Stratton, the director of the Sanger Institute, said understanding had been transformed.
In the latter part of the last century, we were able to identify the first individual genes that became mutated. Now with our ability to sequence the whole genome of very large numbers of cancers, we're moving to essentially more or less comprehensive or complete list of those mutated cancer genes. So it's a very significant moment for cancer research.
He believes new drugs could eventually be targeted at each of the mutations, similar to the way Herceptin is already being used. The scientists also try to find out why genes become mutated in the first place. Mutations leave scars on our DNA, and that allowed the team to identify 12 types of damage that cause mutations in breast tissue. Some are related to family risk, others seem to be the result of fighting off infections, but most are still unexplained. But understanding those offers hopes of being able to prevent some cancers in the first place.
That report from the BBC. Now, we're going to stay with the cancer theme. Last night, we revealed a claim by the drug company that makes melanoma drug, Keytruda, that Pharmac had been using incorrect data, which gives, and I quote, a false and misleading impression of how effective that drug is. The letter written by Merck Sharp and Dome to Health Minister Jonathan Coleman late last year was obtained by Checkpoint under the Official Information Act. Merck Sharp and Dome said Pharmac had been ignoring more recent data about the efficacy of Keytruda. This was denied by the Health Minister Jonathan Coleman, who said the most recent data hadn't been peer-reviewed. Well, today we can reveal Australia's Drug Approval Agency has now signed off on nivolumab, a Keytruda alternative. Someone described them as kind of like Pepsi and Coke. They're so similar. That means both immunotherapy drugs are now publicly funded in Australia. In New Zealand, which now has a higher melanoma rate, the highest in the world, neither are publicly funded. We invited the Health Minister Jonathan Coleman on the program tonight. He declined. He directed us to Pharmac, but Pharmac said it was in discussions with the manufacturers of both drugs, obviously trying to get a good price if they are going to go ahead and fund them, and they declined our invitation to appear. Melanoma patient Lisa Renwick was diagnosed on Mother's Day last year. She was told she was going to die. She's still alive. She's funding Keytruda herself. I asked her for a response to the news that Australia is now funding both drugs.
What a cruel joke, isn't it, John? I mean, here these drugs arrive finally for melanoma patients. Finally, we have the opportunity for treatment that's effective. They're dangled in front of us. They're MedSafe approved, yet the government won't fund them. Yet in Australia, they step up quickly and nimbly to provide the drugs for their people. It feels like we're just falling further and further behind.
Lisa,
I mean, we may be able to beat Australia in the rugby, but we're losing when it comes to care for melanoma patients.
Is the MedSafe approval material, because it's our understanding that now Pharmac is talking to both the manufacturers of Keytruda and of Opdivo, is it your sense that one of those drugs will be available publicly shortly?
Well, we've been told to watch for Budget Day, and that's only, 20 days away. So I'll be watching very carefully, and I would expect the government to step up and fund one or the other. Which one doesn't matter. They're much for muchness, and I understand them wanting to play both companies off against each other, but they're dithering. I mean, in all the time they're taking, there are people dying. They need to step up, and they need to take one of them now. I mean, I've actually got a pile of bereavement cards to write at the moment, John, for people who've died waiting for the government to do something about this. Just fund a treatment. We don't have anything.
Sorry, this is a difficult question, but you actually know people who have died. Those bereavement cards are not a figure of speech. They actually exist. You have to write them, do you?
Correct, I do.
And these are people who have been involved in the campaign to get treatment for metastasized melanoma?
That's correct, yes. Although obviously, for their privacy, I won't mention their names.
And what sort of treatment had they had?
One of them had simply gone for alternative treatment, living well and looking after herself, which helped to a point. Others were fundraising to try to get the money to access treatment. The thing with melanoma is it moves so fast. The time that people take to try to fundraise, to try to cash in insurances, to try to beg friends and family for money, they don't have that time. At that point, they get really sick. And even if they can get their hands on the treatment, it's too late. I mean, in Australia, they don't just have one treatment for melanoma. They have the gene therapy drugs. They now have both immunotherapy drugs. So the oncologists there, they can choose the right time to give those drugs to their patients and the right drugs. All we're asking is for one treatment. And our government just won't take responsibility for it. Nobody is accountable. The Minister of Health isn't accountable. He says it's got nothing to do with him. It's all Pharmac. Pharmac aren't accountable. There's not even an appeals process. It's a secret process. There's no accountability. Nobody's willing to stand up and take responsibility for this. They just pass the buck. And meantime, here we are, the country with the highest rate of melanoma in the world, and we just watch people die. It's like we're just expected to politely go into a corner and die and not make any word of complaint. Well, I'm complaining. I complain that the people in Australia get treated and the people here don't. It's not okay. And somebody needs to stand up and be accountable for that.
If we look at and it's a complex, how do you put this? If we look at the argument against the funding of these immunotherapy drugs, which are very expensive, people say, gosh, this costs a lot of money, as much as $200,000 per patient, and the efficacy is not yet fully established, particularly around longevity, extending life. What is your response to that?
Well, we already know that the figures that Pharmac were using were not the latest figures, which is interesting when you think about it. Secondly, if they're talking about efficacy, surely the first place to start is by opening a dialogue with the experts that we have in this country. We have some fine oncologists in this country with international experience in treating melanoma, and Pharmac won't talk to any of them. Don't talk to me about efficacy. I'm not a scientist, but talk to those people. And they will tell you from their experience overseas that these drugs work. Do they work for everybody? No. No, they don't. But neither do the treatments, sadly, for breast cancer or for bowel cancer. But at least those people get treated. We get nothing. And I would say when it comes to cost, well, we're actually not getting our fair share of the health budget at the moment, melanoma patients. And I would suggest that it might be time for the government to step up and to give Pharmac the funds it needs to treat melanoma patients.
Lisa Renwick, who is obviously on Keytruda, she funds it herself. Pharmac are in negotiations with the drug companies, both Keytruda and the Volumab, and were unable to talk to us today. A court hearing to determine the fate of Prince's estate, including the contents of a secretive vault a musician left behind at Paisley Park, has ended with a special administrator appointed but no will discovered. A short report from Reuters' Diane Hodges.
At a courthouse in suburban Minneapolis, attorneys for Prince's multi-million-dollar estate have told a judge they have not yet found a will, but they haven't stopped looking. 6 siblings or half-siblings of the superstar musician, including his sister Tyka, have been listed as heirs in documents filed with the court. Since the star wasn't married and had no children at the time of his death, the estate is likely to be split among them. It's still not known what caused Prince's death, nor the exact value of his estate, but his music catalog is valued at more than $500 million. And then there's Paisley Park, the compound where he lived. Its vault reportedly holds hundreds of unpublished recordings. A California man has already filed claim to those. Attorneys say his claim probably will not be the last.
Lots and lots of feedback. We're going to go back to the subject of cars, foreign drivers who end up on the wrong side of the road. Cars can be retrofitted with lane departure warning systems for a couple of $1,000s. Of course, rental car companies will resist like hell, but it could be an effective solution. If New Zealand rental cars updated en masse, the cost could be brought down considerably. At the very least, the system should be evaluated by the Ministry of Transport. Foreign drivers, their bailout reflex action is swerved to the right, off the road in their homeland. Here they swerve into oncoming traffic. And lots of people, including Karen here, saying a driver rental 48-hour minimum stand-down period needs to be standard legal requirement for any tourist or visitor in New Zealand from a left-hand driving country. Jack said earlier, somebody said earlier that one night's sleep. So a kind of short stand-down period while people recover, get over the jet lag and get acclimatised. Lots and lots of feedback on Louise Upston and the OIO. It's not good enough, says Graham, that a highly paid CEO blames a staffer. And Louise says the OIO do not seem to have the same level of accountability the rest of us have. I would be sacked for far less. Here are the pips. Kia ora everyone, you are with Checkpoint on RNZ National, on the radio as always, also screening live on Freeview Channel 50, streaming live on the RNZ website. Thank you for being with us and thank you for all of that feedback, lots of it tonight. Coming up in the next 29.5 minutes, the Overseas Investment Office faces an independent inquiry after that Taranaki farm sale. We have a report from Benedict Collins. Leicester City's football fairy tale comes true and more money needed for mental health, but where's it going to come from? But first, here's the news with Katrina Batten.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. The Overseas Investment Office is apologising to the government for failing to conduct a robust inquiry when it approved the sale of Onatai Station in Taranaki to a foreign company. The government has ordered an independent inquiry into the office and the way it carries out good character tests on foreign buyers. Our reporter Benedict Collins has more.
The Labour Party revealed last week the Argentinian buyers were convicted for illegally dumping chemicals from their Argentinian tannery. The Land Information Minister, Louise Upston, says the Overseas Investment Office clearly dropped the ball. Chief Executive Peter Mercy has apologised to the Minister, saying his office failed to carry out a robust investigation into the applicants. Mr Mercy says his office also failed to alert the Minister to information it had about the pollution incident. From Parliament, Benedict Collins.
The Prime Minister says he is being straight with the public about his involvement with the foreign trust sector. John Key has been forced to defend himself and his personal lawyer, Ken Whitney, in Parliament this afternoon, following allegations he pressured the Revenue Minister to drop a review of the trust sector. In a 2014 email, Mr Whitney said he was worried about Inland Revenue's plans and lobbied Mr Key against any changes to foreign trust rules. A year later, the IRD decided not to review the trust sector. During question time today, Mr Key said he simply referred a query to a minister. The former Revenue Minister, Todd McClay, says he didn't know that one of 8 trust lawyers he met to discuss foreign trust rules was the Prime Minister's lawyer. The Reserve Bank of Australia has moved to head off fears about deflation, cutting its official cash rate by 25 basis points to an historic low of 1.75%. It's the first change with interest rates since May last year, when rates were cut 25 basis points to 2%. The Federal Treasurer, Scott Morrison, will hand down his first budget later tonight. Cancer Research UK says a study that mapped the genetic mutations that cause breast cancer is an important step towards new treatment. An international team of scientists led by the Sanger Institute in Cambridge examined all 3 billion letters in the genetic code of 560 cancer patients. The largest study of its kind, it determined 93 genes that could mutate to become cancerous. Dr Emma Smith of Cancer Research UK says identifying specific cancer-prone genes can lead to targeted treatment.
It's called tailoring treatments. By understanding the causes, the underlying biology of different types of the disease, we might be able to match better treatments and offer them things that are more likely to work for them.
Dr Emma Smith of Cancer Research UK. The family of a pregnant woman killed in a Northland crash on Saturday says the driver who caused the accident should also be charged with the death of her unborn baby. Kylie Rakic and another passenger, Virginia Keogh, were killed when their car crashed head-on with a car driven by an American tourist. Kylie Rakic's partner and her 5-year-old daughter were injured. The American man has been charged with careless driving, causing death and injury. But Kylie's sister, Leish King, says her sister was 8 months pregnant and the driver of the vehicle should also be charged with the death of the unborn baby, Harper.
I felt that was unjustified, that bit there where he only got charged for the 2 and not the 3 of them. That was really hard for the whole family, not just myself. Leish
King says she wants tighter driving restrictions for tourists. 11 cases of measles have been confirmed in Waikato, and a further 13 cases are also under investigation. The Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Richard Wall, says 5 of the suspected cases are people who went to a Tainui Waka Kapahaka festival 2 weeks ago, which was also attended by a person already infected with measles. Dr. Wall says the incubation period for measles is about 2 weeks, so most people who are at the festival will have become unwell by now if they're going to get the virus, but he says a few could still get it this week.
The message that's still important for people is to just be aware of what the symptoms are, and if you do become unwell, to stay at home and contact your doctor and let them know before turning up at the doctors so that you don't unwittingly infect other people.
Dr. Richard Wall. In sport, the Warriors Rugby League Club has put Kiwis winger Manu Vatavai on medical leave but is still refusing to comment on the incident that led to it. And the Warriors Managing Director Jim Doyle says the club is continuing to focus on the welfare of the other 5 players who were disciplined in the wake of the loss to Melbourne last week. 6 players, including Vatavai, were reportedly involved in a night out where they mixed prescription drugs with energy drinks and then failed to turn up for a team meeting the next day. The NRL says the Parramatta Eels have had numerous opportunities to come clean about their rorting of the salary cap, but have failed to do so. The club has been stripped of 12 points and fined over $1 million, with NRL Chief Executive Todd Greenberg saying Parramatta has breached the salary cap in 5 of the past 6 seasons, including 2016.
This decision follows a long period of instability at this club. In the last 7 years, this club has had 25 directors, 6 CEOs and 4 head coaches. They've breached the salary cap rules in 5 of the last 6 years. This has to stop.
NRL Chief Executive Todd Greenberg. New Zealand basketballer Stephen Adams has played a leading hand in helping Oklahoma City Thunder pull off an upset win over the San Antonio Spurs in Game 2 of the NBA Western Conference semi-final. Oklahoma won 98-97 to level the series 1-1, with Adams scoring 12 points and taking 17 rebounds. That's the news.
Hi, it's Paul Brennan in for Brian Crump on Nights Tonight. We have another travel odyssey. Nigel Roberts will tell us about the walk he and his wife Heather did last year, the 285-kilometre-long, 1,300-year-old Offa's Dyke path that follows the England-Wales border. Our night's pundit is University of Otago political historian Professor Brian Roper, who deconstructs public policies from around the globe. He'll be doing that. We've got the sampler and another window on the world. And there's more tonight on Nights after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. You should have heard John singing that. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Mostly fine, isolated showers tomorrow. Waikato, Waitomo, Taumaranui, Taupo and Taranaki. Cloudy periods and a few showers. Whanganui, Manawatu, Taihape, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Fine with variable high cloud. Kapiti, Wairarapa and Wellington. Occasional rain, mainly in the west, with some heavy falls about the ranges, easing tomorrow and clearing from Wairarapa. Nelson and Marlborough, cloudy periods and scattered showers, mostly about the Sounds and Ranges. Canterbury, fine, high cloud increasing tomorrow. Otago and Southland, fine, however rain developing in Southland and Clutha tomorrow afternoon, spreading elsewhere during the evening. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, rain spreading everywhere tomorrow morning with heavy falls south of Otera, and the Chatham Islands, mainly fine. It is just gone 6:08.
I was slouching when Katrina finished and they cut to the wide shot. If you're listening on the radio, that was what that thump was, as I sat up like a Victorian schoolboy.
The things we have to put up with in
here.
Yeah,
no, sorry, that was very rude.
It was.
If Gail, the standards manager at Radio New Zealand, saw me slouching, I'm in severe trouble. There'll be an email. Don't slouch, boy. Sharon Crosby used to call me boy when she was the CEO of Radio New Zealand. She'd say, boy. But what are you doing, boy? I used to go, I don't know. Anyway.
Moving on.
Okay, moving on. The government has ordered an independent inquiry into the Overseas Investment Office. We spoke to the Minister, Louise Upston, before, after it was revealed that it approved the sale of a Taranaki farm to Argentinian brothers with convictions for, well, polluting a river. And the office is now apologising profusely to the Land Information Minister, saying it failed to carry out a robust investigation. Our political reporter Benedict Collins has more.
On Friday, the Labour MP David Cunliffe revealed the brothers, whose company bought Ornitai Station in 2014, were convicted for illegally dumping chemicals from their Argentinian tannery. Today, the Land Information Minister Louise Upston ordered an inquiry.
I do have some concerns about the processes that the office have used around the good character test. So I have asked that a review be undertaken about that. So I think you'll hear more about that later today, but I am concerned about it.
In a statement, Land Information New Zealand's Chief Executive, Peter Mercy, apologised to the Minister, saying his office failed to carry out a robust investigation into the applicants. Mr Mercy says it also failed to pass on key information to the Minister and promised that it wouldn't happen again. Ms Upston says it's possible the brothers could lose the farm.
One of the enforcement actions available to the Overseas Investment Office is to force the sale of the property, absolutely.
The Chief Executive has apologised to you. He said that they failed to carry out a robust investigation into this company that bought the farm. They sound almost incompetent here, don't they?
No. So what I would say, with this application that was considered, yes, they dropped the ball.
In his public apology, Mr Mercy says improvements were made in 2014 to the way the Overseas Investment Office carries out good character tests. He says since then, when it researches potential foreign buyers on the internet, it uses keywords such as fraud and conviction. That's astounded Labour's finance spokesperson Grant Robertson.
It's laughable that they haven't had somebody responsible for doing a Google search on terms like fraud. Surely that's a core part of their job. What it does is it brings into question every single application that the OIO has processed when it comes to sensitive land.
At the same time as the Overseas Investment Office was apologising and the independent inquiry was ordered, the Prime Minister John Key was telling foreign diplomats at Parliament what a stellar job the office does.
Foreign buyers of sensitive land must go through a rigorous application process and prove they offer greater benefits to New Zealand than would be obtained through a domestic sale. I believe we have the right balance between encouraging investment and ensuring that investment benefits New Zealand.
Land Information's Peter Mercy refused to be interviewed by Radio New Zealand. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.
Lots of emails coming in on driving on the wrong side of the road, and Karen, Peter and Martin have all sent in emails describing when they did it as New Zealanders overseas. Lovely emails, thank you. And yeah, we have to remind ourselves that we travel too. Queenstown is facing a worsening accommodation crisis as hundreds of workers start to arrive for the busy winter ski season. One trend easing the pressure is for an increasing number of Queenstown workers to live in Cromwell. It's an hour's drive away through the narrow and sometimes icy Kawerau Gorge. Our Queenstown reporter has been in Cromwell today, and I asked him how well Cromwell will be able to cope with all these extra residents.
Well, John, I guess that's the big question. All of the pressure on Queenstown is, if you like, being relieved here in Cromwell. I'm with the Mayor, Tony Lepper, who's going to talk to us in a second about the way that Cromwell is coping. But first, I just want to talk briefly about the drive between here and Queenstown. It's not an easy road. There's hardly any straight bits, very few overtaking opportunities. And of course, in winter, it gets very iced up. So in terms of a commuting option, it couldn't really be more difficult, but nevertheless, many Queenstown companies have decided they have to put their employees here in Cromwell. And I guess the big question for Mayor Tony Lepper is, can Cromwell cope with the influx?
Oh, we can definitely cope. Cromwell actually has had people commuting to Queenstown for a long time, a lot of tradies, but I think now we're probably seeing more of those other skilled workers having to go through to Queenstown as well. It can cope. Currently, I think there's only about 20 sections on the market in Cromwell, full stop, but there's a lot of land consented and ready to go for sections. So as you're going to see around us, a lot of activity in Cromwell. We're getting the houses up and running, the infrastructure's here, and development contributions are helping us upgrade that infrastructure so we can take these people.
Well, the house behind us in Queenstown would cost an easy $600,000 or $700,000. What will this house go on the market for when it's finished?
I'm guessing that the underlying land value was $150,000. I know that, and maybe this would go for in the low 400s. That's the sort of price I think you're paying.
So really, that this drive through the gorge is worth it, because the houses, from what you're saying, might be $200,000 or $250,000 cheaper.
Yeah, it's probably a more affordable option for those people to live in Cromwell than it is in Queenstown, that's for sure.
And you've got a 700-bed workers' hostel being built as well.
Yes, that's just coming on. That should be on stream by just after Christmas. They're currently going through the resource consent. That was sort of one of those things, a eureka moment really, when some developers offered to come and build that. That was on land that council owns, and we've offered that to those developers as long as they put in 400 of those 700 beds in the first instance, and that's going to relieve a lot of pressure on our horticultural industry and maybe even some of those businesses from Queenstown.
But does it damage the identity of places like Alexandra and Cromwell if you become, if you like, a place where refugees from Queenstown live?
Oh, absolutely not. We've had Central Otago has been populated by people who came from somewhere else, and that's the case. So Cromwell and Alexandra, I mean, if they work away, so what? I've spent half my life working away. They've still got their weekends to do things, to join our sporting clubs, be part of our community. They'll fit in perfectly.
Well, there you have it, John. The Mayor optimistic, but don't underestimate the size of the problem. The Queenstown is so full. We're hearing stories now of lounge rooms being divided into 2 extra bedrooms, and people even sharing a bed on a sort of 24-hour roster, two people to 1 bed. So obviously a lot of pressure here in Cromwell, but it sounds like the system can take it for the time being. Back to you.
Thanks very much indeed. That was our Queenstown reporter, Peter Newport, speaking from Cromwell with Central Otago Mayor Tony Lepper. If you were listening, not watching, it was the most beautiful Central Otago blue sky behind them. The Justice Minister wants more spent on mental health services for those appearing and being sentenced in the country's courts. But the Ministry of Health says mental health services are already under strain and there's little scope to do what the Minister wants. Catherine Hutton reports.
11% of the general population have sought mental health treatment, but that number increases 4-fold for those who appear in court and 5-fold for those on community sentences. The Justice Minister, Amy Adams, says her ministry is picking up the pieces and she wants the health sector to take more responsibility.
Net, almost in the justice system, picking up where the health system hasn't really addressed some of these issues, and I need them to change their thinking in the same way we have to change ours.
The figures are drawn from a new computer modelling tool, which the government is using to underpin what it calls social investment strategy. Essentially, that means using information and technology to better understand what works and then adjusting the services accordingly. It's also part of a more coordinated government approach, which Miss Adams says affects not only the Ministry of Justice, but also the areas of health, social welfare and education.
The justice sector is not an island. These people don't suddenly turn up one day in the justice system, and our best opportunity to stop them committing crime happens long before they come to us.
She wants the Ministry of Health to take a more holistic approach and consider the benefits across the entire system, not just the health sector.
When the district health boards and the Ministry of Health sit down to make their decisions as to where they allocate their budget, which is getting larger and larger every year, and the mental health budget in particular is been topped up again recently, they need to be assessing the cost-benefit analysis, if you want to put it in fiscal terms, right across the whole of the sector.
But the Ministry of Health told justice officials its services were already under pressure, including a shortage of cognitive behavioural therapists. That statement is voiced.
The Ministry of Health advises that mental health services are under significant demand pressure, so there would be very limited scope to shift their focus towards reducing offending. There is also a rather limited CBT-trained workforce, so expanding it would take time.
Labour's health spokesperson, Annette King, says that's the first time she's seen the ministry publicly admit that they are under pressure in mental health.
You don't solve it by telling them that they need to do more unless you're going to back it up with a budget allocation. So you've got an impasse here, really. A minister saying we're going to have data and we want this to happen, and a Ministry of Health saying, well, we can't do that because we're already under huge pressure.
Amy Adams is confident the Health Ministry will change its position.
As better information becomes available to tell us more about the value of these interventions across the government system, I think that would change the prioritisation discussions.
But Annette King doubts that.
Part of the problem for the Ministry of Health is the government no longer has made mental health one of their priorities. They have targets. It doesn't include mental health.
The Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman, says spending on mental health for inmates is essential.
Work closely together all the time to make sure
that we're joined up between health and justice. More and more money is going into mental health, but as with every area of health spend, we've got to continually look at how we can best target them.
Annette King says the annual increase of $50 million a year for mental health was introduced when Labor was in power 11 years ago, and the funding levels haven't changed, despite increasing demands on the sector. She says the increasing number of media reports about failings in the mental health system show how underfunded the sector is. For Checkpoint, Catherine Hutton.
The worst drought in Zimbabwe in 2 decades has left up to 4 million people in the African nation facing starvation. Earlier this year, Zimbabwe's government declared a state of national disaster and appealed for €1.4 billion in food aid as the drought takes its toll on harvests. Mana Rabi from Reuters explains.
Even in the best of times, life is harsh in Mwenezi, near Zimbabwe's southern border. But after the worst regional drought in nearly a decade, life is getting even harder for people like Agnes Mashila. Like many here, her crops are decimated, her granary almost empty, meaning she barely has food to feed her children. There's some sorghum and wild leaves, which she dries before cooking.
The rains came late. A few plants that survived the dry spell revived. We don't know if they'll make it.
The drought that's hit this southern African nation so hard was brought on by El Niño weather. But whatever its cause, the government says it's forced some 4 million people towards hunger. In Mwenezi, among the worst affected areas, officials say half the population needs food aid. Fresh water, too, is scarce, so women, the primary caregivers in many families, walk long distances in search of the water.
I have had to leave my 3-month-old baby at home. Look how dirty I am. There is a big water problem here.
The government's declared a state of national disaster. It's appealing to the U.S., a major donor, for $1.6 billion in food aid. But until help does arrive, aid agencies already warn the lack of water could help spread disease. And farmers who have already lost their crops and cattle fear even more pain as the year drags on.
After that Reuters track from Zimbabwe, it's a good time to remind you that in 8.5 minutes, World Watch PM at 6:30 with John Greaves is on tonight. The latest on Syria's peace talks. They're taking place in Switzerland, and more on that major breakthrough in, well, the world's understanding really of breast cancer. All of that coming up with John on World Watch PM at 6:30. Speaking of being out in the world, let's stay there. It's being described as a fairy tale. That was the reaction from the Leicester City football team when the final whistle blew in the Chelsea-Tottenham English Premiership match this morning. The 2-2 draw between the two London sides handed the Premiership title to the Foxes for the first time in their 132-year history. 5,000 to 1 odds. You have to say in hindsight they were stupid odds, but that's what they were paying. The BBC commentator John Murray described the moment.
This may well be the last action of the game. Willian with a free kick for Chelsea. Oh, he's angled it wide here to the left-hand side. They're not going to take it to the corner flag, are they? They are! And that's it! It's finished 2-2. And we can say now, Leicester City are the Premier League champions. They've won the league for the first time in their history.
Magic. Not enough of that in sport. The club had only just avoided relegation last year. They did start the season at 5,000 to 1 outsiders to win the title this season. Remember, there are only 20 teams in the Premiership League, so 5,000 to 1, goodness. But Leicester City defied all the odds and have come away with the Premiership win with 2 games still to play. The team's fans were absolutely ecstatic, celebrating in Leicester streets.
It's a dream! It's a dream come true! It's amazing!
This is the greatest feeling ever. Incredible, unbelievable. This is the greatest team on planet Earth right now. We are going to win the Champions League next season as well.
Shaking. I'm really surprised I've not cried yet. I thought I'd just burst into tears. Everybody's just like, oh my God, oh my God.
Oh my God, oh my God. The BBC's football reporter John Bennett was out amongst the fans at Leicester City's home ground. Bear in mind there was no game on, everyone just assembled outside King Power Stadium.
Fans began gathering here outside the King Power Stadium as soon as Eden Hazard scored that second Chelsea goal. It started in the hundreds, now it is in the thousands. I hope you can hear the scenes behind me. It's incredible. A fan has just walked up onto one of the balconies and lifted a fake Premier League trophy. On Saturday, the real Premier League trophy will be lifted by Wes Morgan in front of 30,000 Leicester City fans during the home game against Everton. There's about 30,000 behind me now. They've got flags, they've got banners, flares have been set off as well. Of course, it's an amazing fairy tale story. Leicester City were 5,000 to 1 outsiders at the start of the season to win the English Premier League. Remember, they only escaped relegation by the skin of their teeth last season. It was called the Great Escape, and many tipped them for relegation this season. Many said that Claudio Ranieri would be the first manager to be sacked. But against all the odds, they started the season fantastically well, and they kept being consistent. Claudio Ranieri found the winning formula. The likes of Jamie Vardy, the top scorer, kept hitting the back of the net. N'Golo Kante, signed for around £5 million from French football, was a revelation. Riyad Mahrez, the English PFA Player of the Year. Some wonderful performances for Leicester City, and it's culminated in these scenes outside the King Power Stadium. The party will go on long into the night. The fans would never have believed that they would come anywhere near winning the English Premier League title, but now they are the champions, and they can enjoy one of the most unlikely sporting fairy tales, surely, in modern history.
And for once, it's not an overstatement. I think that probably is really true. Earlier in Checkpoint, we spoke to the MP for Leicester East. It was 1 in the morning. He'd had a wonderful night. That interview's, we played it after 5 o'clock, but the interview is available online if you want to hear a truly delighted MP. Let's talk sports some more with our sports editor, Stephen Hughes. And the Warriors ringer, Manu Vatuvei, has been placed on medical leave just days after he and 5 other players from the Rugby League club were suspended from the team for breaching protocol. Those players were reportedly involved in a night out where they mixed prescription drugs with energy drinks and then failed to turn up for a team meeting the next day. Hi, Stephen. You there with us? And hi, Stephen. Nice to see you.
Hi, John.
Why has Manu Vatuvei been placed on medical leave? This is odd, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, because we haven't had the club actually come out and say why. They've put out a statement saying that he's simply on medical leave. We can only assume because of the reports that we've had during the week that 6 of those players were on a night out after that loss to Melbourne, which was the biggest loss of the season for the Warriors so far. And a day after that, they had a night out, and the reports are that it involved energy drinks and prescription medications. The players then failed to turn up to a team meeting the next day. And this disciplinary process has sort of been underway. They were banned or suspended from playing against St George Illawarra the following week. And of course, 3 of them, including Vatuvei, were banned from being part of the Kiwis this week against Australia.
Okay, so we don't know why he's on medical leave. Strange old tweet he posted, this a weird selfie, and yeah, tough times in that team. But let's not speculate. In other rugby league news today, Stephen, the NRL has stripped the Parramatta Eels of all its competition points for breaching the salary cap. Are these guys serial offenders? Is my memory correct here?
Yeah, they have. Last year they were in trouble as well. But over the past, I think, 6 or past 7 years, they've had 6 different CEOs. They've had 4 different head coaches and 25 different directors. So things have not been well at the club for quite some time. So they've been fined the maximum of $1 million as well. And as you say, they've had those 12 competition points taken away. So the NRL says over the past, or since 2013, that Parramatta's breached the salary cap by about $3 million. And they, including this season, they think they're over by about $620,000. The NRL says, look, we've given Parramatta plenty of time to come forward and to give their opportunity to try and explain things. They've refused that, and so they've now taken this step. Theoretically, I mean, they could still actually make the playoffs, Parramatta. They're saying they're going to give them the opportunity to win points again if they can get under the salary cap. Now, of course, how they do that is going to take quite some doing. It's obviously going to have to involve sacking players or renegotiating deals, and how long that then takes before the points can then accrue again for them remains to be seen.
Stephen, just quickly, they've also been stripped of their NRL Auckland Knights title, have they?
Yeah, that's right as well. And unfortunately, for Warriors fans, it doesn't mean they get the title, of course, because they were the other finalists. It simply means there is no official winner.
Stephen Hewson, thank you, our sports editor, talking about the Warriors, the woes at the Warriors off the field. They played well over the weekend with those 6 players absent. Lots of feedback tonight, and we wanted to end with this. The UK is a short boat ride, Ian Thorpe says from Wellington, or tunnel away from a continent that drives on the other side of the road. There are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of European tourists coming every year, many in cars. In 7 years living there, I do not remember any media concern about dangerous foreign drivers. I wonder why not. They must have similar problems to ours. How do they deal with this? There may be helpful lessons to be learned out there. I think that is a fascinating question, Ian, and we might try and talk to someone in England about that. Of course, there's more traffic on the road in England, obviously, although not in those remote northern parts of Scotland or the south of Ireland. Joanne McGregor is saying, how lovely during my first sleepless jet lag days in the city of my birth to listen to people talking about Leicester. Celebrating Leicester on RNZ. Good on you, and thank you for listening, everyone.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The government says one person in the Overseas Investment Office failed to put important information into an application form for a foreign company to buy a Taranaki farm. The Prime Minister has been forced to defend himself and his lawyer following allegations he pressured the Revenue Minister to drop a review of the trust sector. And Australia's Reserve Bank has cut the official interest rate to a new low of 1.75%, just hours before the federal budget is handed down. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Welcome to World Watch PM on RNZ National, International and online. I'm John Greaves. Tonight, the start of a new era in space studies, Venezuela's worsening crisis